Hello, and welcome to Sharing Stories and Knowledge with Dr. MPQ. I am Dr. Maria Elizabeth Perez-Quetives and the host of this podcast. Today episode is going to be about managing the job market. I feel that the current situation that a lot of us are in is with the changes in higher ed and government and other economic areas. There's a lot of us who have been managing the job market. And so I feel that this topic is needed for myself and for many others. So today I'll be talking about my experiences and how I've been managing the job market and some of the ups and downs that I've been dealing with. And I'm hopeful that this will motivate or resonate with other my audience and help you manage the job market and get through it, and hopefully it would get better. Talking about this topic for me has been hard because I feel with having finished my PhD in August of 2022, prior to that, a lot of my preparation for the job market and being competitive to seek a tenure track professor position has been part of what I've done for many, many years. However, with the pandemic and other personal things that happened in my family, I had a shift in what exactly I wanted to do. So just to give you a little bit background of kind of where I've been, the things that I've kind of been managing, um, in order for you to understand how difficult sometimes this can be for people, even though someone like myself who has a wide range of experience and also has a lot of education. And so I think that that contributes to a lot of my emotionals up and downs that I've been dealing with. So I'll start off by saying, so as I shared, I finished my PhD in August of 2022. At that time, I knew that I wasn't going to seek a tenure track professor position. So I decided to go into administration, specifically student support services. So I was on the job market from August of 2022 to about November of 2023. I got a position with San Jose State University, working with student services there. And I worked with them between December of 2023 to November of 2024. I was let go from San Jose State. I feel that my experience at San Jose State, that could be another episode on its own, because I feel there's a lot that I've learned when I was working at San Jose State. However, in this episode, I'm not going to talk about that specifically. So I've been on the job market now for 9 months. I was let go in November of 2024, and now we're in August of 2025. And so a part of me struggles with that because in my mind, I think, okay, the way that um, attaining an education in the US and the way that they reference this American dream is that, you know what, you go to school, you get educated, and your dreams will be fulfilled. However, many of us who have studied higher education, the policies and organization of higher education, and when it comes down to certain populations and the whole structure of that institution, it's not so short and sweet. There's more complex to that. It's not the American dream, unfortunately, is non-existent. I think the way that the US endorses education, right? It's a commodity. It's a business. And so, however, but people as a society, I think that we're trained very young to be like, hey, you go to school, you work hard, and you get the job, and your dream comes true. However, that's not the case. And so for me, being on the job market for 9 months and having my associates in psychology, my bachelor's degree in behavioral science, my master's and PhD in education, policy, organization, and leadership, I sometimes feel like, well, how can someone with this much education experience still be on the job market? So that plays with my emotions. That plays with a lot of my ups and downs. There was a period of time after I finished my PhD where I feel like all this experiences of what I've been feeling, it wasn't what I expected. As a PhD student, I had this outlook of, okay, once I'm done with my PhD, this is what my life is going to look like, and that hasn't been the case. And so I feel that a variety of things that I've done managing the job market. Well, for let me back up a little bit. So what I've been applying to now that I've been on the job market for these past months is administration positions and specifically student services. And then I also been applying to professor positions, teaching positions at the community college, specifically in ethnic studies and education leadership. And so there are different job portals that I've been using. A few of them are higher education jobs, the Chronicles of Higher Education, LinkedIn. I also directly go to colleges or universities and I go to their job portals. So I have applied to over 20 institutions, community colleges, state, and UCs. I've applied to public and private institutions. I have written an enormous amount of cover letters and edited my CVs and resumes, that to the point where I feel like I don't know the difference between one or the other, because I feel like when you're managing so many jobs, you kind of get caught up in that. I think also for me specifically, and this may not be the case for other individuals, but for me specifically, when I first finished graduate school, all my materials were prepped for teaching positions and professor positions. So I had to like teach myself there's a big difference between professor jobs and administrator jobs. So I had to teach myself how to apply to administrator jobs. And so trying to shift my mind into like, what does that mean? And then when I started doing that, I was in administrator jobs. And when after I lost my position with San Jose State, I had to shift back to teaching jobs. So I constantly, when I'm looking at jobs, I have to ask myself, okay, on this job, what type of job? Because what kind of materials do they want? How do I answer? How do I write the cover letter? How does my CV need to look? So constantly changing back and forth, that also contribute to the amount of stress and the work that I put in, and the applications that I've been submitting. So that is a lot of work on my end, but a lot of stress as well. I've also participated in some career developments. I know there's a lot of people, I feel like I haven't been in a job for 8 plus 10 years, like a lot of people, where, they haven't edited their materials for current jobs. And as I'm in different workshops and stuff, there's individuals in the attending these workshops where they've been at a job, for many years, and now they got to figure out how to apply for jobs again. So I could definitely understand the stress in that. But I want to give a shout out to Dr. Derek Attic, and hopefully I'm saying his name right. My apologies, Derek. I'm going to spell his last name Attig. I highly suggest that you find him on LinkedIn. He's doing free career support with some colleagues. I met Derek at the University of Illinois around Champaign, and he helped me early on, prep for the job market when I was going to apply for a professor position. I remember at the beginning having conversations with him about developing my CV and what is a cover letter, and being stressed out about it. But I reached out to him and I was like, Derek, please tell me that I'm not losing my brain. Please tell me that I'm not going crazy, because that's what it felt like. I felt like the amount of jobs that I keep applying to and applying to, and it really gets really, really overwhelmed, because a lot of the times you put so much time and effort into these jobs, and then you're not hearing from these institutions. And so I really suggest that if you're interested, they offer, I believe it's like a 20 or 30-minute session with you if you wanted advice on interview preparation or feedback on a resume, or a cover letter. But yeah, look him up on LinkedIn. They were very, very helpful. They also offer a resource um, document, which is an Excel sheet that talks about networking and job searching and materials and interview preparation. So, and they offer all the materials free on LinkedIn. And so I really, really suggest that you look him up if you're into doing some career development and figuring out ways of how to manage this job market. So Like I said, there's a vulnerable part, and I have to say that there's days where I'm looking for jobs and I feel strong and I'm finding jobs and I'm like, yes, I'm excited about applying to this job. And then there's another part where I feel like with the amount of experience that I have, why don't I have a job yet? And that contributes to my stress. I'm the type of person that I've been working since the age of 14. I was self-employed for 13 years, running my own house cleaning business before I decided to go back to school. And the whole time that I was in school, from the community college all the way to my PhD, I've always worked. And so for me to have been on the job market now for 9 months and not working, it's causing me a lot of mental stress because it makes me feel like I'm not good enough. It makes me feel like I'm not qualified. And a lot of the times when I'm looking at these jobs, um, the amount of things that they're asking for, it seems it kind of rolls me through this mental state of me feeling like I'm not good enough. And so when it comes to the jobs that are available out there, some of the things that I've been seeing is within California itself, I feel that there are some positions that have a fairly decent wage. However, jobs outside California, I feel that a lot of the jobs, and you start reading the experience they want, but really the job duties, I feel that the pay is too low. I feel that there's like coordinator positions or assistant director positions, and they're wanting to offer you like $18 an hour, or they're wanting to offer you like $43,000 a year. So for me, I currently live in California. For me to move out of California to another state, I feel that that pay needs to be worth me relocating. But I also feel that, and this also happened with my experience at San Jose State, I get hired for one position. Then once you start, they really want you to do five positions, but pay you for one position. So this is a lot of what I'm seeing in calls is that the the expectation of the duties are there, but the pay is not meeting the it's not the pay itself. It's not aligning with the job duties. I feel that they expect a lot more for you, and the pay is low. There's also academic probation that exists in certain jobs. You get hired for these positions and then you're on probation, and again, that's another episode that I'm going to talk about later. I now understand more about how academic probation at California state universities and how they organize these probations within the policies. And that's a lot of gray areas for folks that get in there, like myself, who thinks, okay, I'll start at this position, then slowly kind of work my way up. But again, because of these policies and probation policies, that's going to keep me from moving. A little bit about the application process. There's definitely a difference between applying to administrator positions and professor positions. When it comes to administrative positions, they commonly want a cover letter, references, a resume or CV. In the application itself, there's a lot of questions about diversity. I've answered so many questions about diversity to the point where I'm like, how many different ways can you ask about diversity? So I see a lot of that. When it comes to professor applications, they want like personal statements, they want your CV, they want your publications, they want to know your teaching background, they want to know research. And again, there's different types of professor positions, but specifically the ones that I'm looking at were 10-year track or adjunct lecturer positions. So when it comes to adjuncts and lecturers versus assistant associate professor positions. Right now, with the economy the way it is, I do see an increase in adjunct and lecturer positions, which in my understanding of those positions is there's less job security in those positions. I know that California state universities and University of California had a hiring freeze, so I do see a decline in positions from these institutions. And then also, when it comes after you look for these jobs, you put time and effort and apply to these jobs, there's this waiting process. I'm at the point where I look at my email, I check my email. I have to like not every little 5 minutes check my email because I feel like sometimes you want to get desperate that way. So I check it daily, but I don't check it throughout the day for my sanity. But I'm at the point where, like, is my email broken? Like, because the amount of applications that I'm submitting, you're wondering, like, why haven't I heard back from anyone? And there are a few responses, but really there's a lot of no responses. And that also derails you from applying. It's like you apply, you put all this time, you put all your material together and you apply for these positions, and then you get nothing. Organize, and I keep track of all the positions that I applied for, the ones that I decided not to apply for, the ones that I did submit applications to, and I have a lot no response applications. So the advice I got from Derek was pick a position, apply to it, and let it go. And if they respond back to you, great. But that leads me to the next topic is the motivation, right, to keep going and applying to positions. I feel for me, it's been this up and down. And this process of how do I stay motivated, right? When who really wants to sit down and apply to jobs? We're talking like 50, 100 jobs. Who wants to keep doing this over and over and over, and then you hear no responses? And then where does that motivation come from? I have to admit, for my sanity, like sometimes, like an example that I have is that I had applied for this teaching job at a community college for ethnic studies, and I did like 2 weeks. I really concentrated. I was really excited about this job. I really felt that that department was a fit for me, and I really, really put time into this job and my preparation. I even asked for feedback on my cover letter from a friend of mine who's a professor. And so I put all this time into developing that job. And then within less than 2, 3 days, they got back to me and said I didn't qualify, because in community colleges, for you to teach there, you have to have certain degrees. I didn't have a master's in ethnic studies or one of the ethnic groups. So they thought right away the committee had denied my application. Again, I feel that this is another episode for me, because that process derailed me from applying to community colleges. I ask you, those of you who are listening, what is your motivation to keep going? And it changes for me often, but the one thing that I try to do is get support. My husband gives me support and he tells me different words of motivation. I have friends who keep reminding me, of my worth. And then, lastly, I I've been um considered to not continue working in higher education or education in general, and seek a different job. But I have to say that in reflecting on my process, what I feel keeps me motivated and keeps me going is my passion to share my experience and my knowledge, with others, and students. As someone who has a 16-year, took me 16 years straight, with a year gap in the middle between my bachelor's and my graduate school, to get 4 degrees. And so, for me, I feel that I have a lot to offer. I have a lot to share, um, about what I've learned, my personal experience in navigating through the community college and getting my Associate of Arts in Psychology, then transferring to San Jose State and getting my Bachelor's of Art in Behavioral Science, and two minors, and one in sociology, one in communications, and then my experience with research and being a McNair scholar, and then deciding to go to graduate school and move out of state from California, Illinois, to get my master's and my PhD. I feel that I've learned so much about higher ed, about the organization structure of higher ed and the policies, and then how that applies to different populations, like first generation students, mothers and fathers who are seeking their degrees and raising their children and caring for their families. Those of us who come from lower working class backgrounds, non-traditional students, and what does non-traditional students mean. I have a background in studying, what is non-traditional students, and how higher ed and institutions across the US refers to traditional and non-traditional students, adult learners, community college students, students of colors, you name it. I've studied it. I've studied all different populations in higher ed. And so I feel that me not continuing to work in higher ed and serving or mentoring and teaching other individuals is a disservice to myself, but also to other individuals that I feel that I could help. And so I feel that instead of my experience in navigating the job market and the up and downs, and also working for institutions, and me being frustrated and disappointed with some of the things that I'm seeing in the leadership, I ask myself, what could I do right that's in my control? What could I do right now? And so me creating this podcast is my way of motivating myself to keep going. I created this podcast to give myself a platform so that I could talk about the things that I've been personally dealing with currently, but then also some of the things that I feel that I have dealt with, and or that I see other individuals dealing with. I feel a lot of what contribute to my success in managing everything that I've done has been from others sharing their stories with me, or them giving their advice to me or mentoring me, has helped me feel better about myself, but then also help me manage the process. And so that's what I want to do. I want to be very intentional in helping others. I'm very passionate about it. I love learning about other individuals and their goals and their successes, but also some of their challenges. And so that's what I want to do. I want to keep working, providing support and reaching an audience and sharing my stories and knowledge with you. But I hope, again, everything that I'm talking about resonates with you in one way or another, or helps to motivate you for you to keep going so that you could work towards your passions or trying to figure out your next moves. And so, thank you for listening. And I look forward to talking more about my journey in higher ed and like the different experiences that I've had managing the job market. All right. Thank you.